Remastered, huh? I don't think that word means what you think it means. But sure, let's go with it. This is DuckTales Remastered, released in 2013 for PC via Steam, also on PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, mobile devices, and hey, even the Wii U got in on that action. Anyway, so I want to touch on something real quick because I feel like wasting time, but the title of the game, DuckTales Remastered, implies taking a very old game, in this case the original DuckTales on NES, touching up the graphics and sounds, polished a couple things up here and there you go, fresh product. That's not what this is. What this is a full-blown remake of the original 1989 DuckTales that graced the Nintendo Entertainment System, where you take the old game, strip it down to parts, reassemble it with new artwork and audio components, which includes bringing in the then-surviving cast of the original DuckTales cartoon to do some voiceover work, which I'd imagine had to be a selling point, expanding on the original game's offering by adding some things here and there, and for some reason calling it a mere remastering. Now, I remember watching a video from a notable YouTuber who was not thrilled with this one for some reason or another, mostly the result of the additional padding of sorts, which is funny because that dude's mostly positive about these things, and also from what I've gathered, the general reception to Remastered was fairly positive for the most part. Now, I bought this game off Steam like ages ago. Never got around to playing it until now, and that was mostly because of the whole Disney Afternoon experiment that we had going on back in May. And look, I have no nostalgia whatsoever for DuckTales, never played much of the game back in the day, not in huge doses anyway, and it was only recently that I got around to playing both titles fully earlier this year. So while I've got some idea on how those games play and thus have a frame of reference to compare this title to, I'm not entirely irreverent to them either. To me, it's not a matter of how this compares to the original because again, this is not a mere remastering. It's not the same game given a nice bit shine and maybe a couple fixes to make it look, sound, and play better. This is a whole new take on old material, and while there's a lot of familiar elements here and there, it's not quite the same game either. Hence we open not with the usual stage select screen, but with what some would call a needless tutorial level. On the one hand, it sets up the plot and teaches those who have no familiarity with the source material, either the cartoon or the game that this is quote-unquote remastering, derp, the basic premise and mechanics of the game. On the other hand, it's nothing that you can't learn in the field and thus is completely needless. So once you get past that, then we have options. We could use the supercomputer to go on our grand adventure, we could go to the gallery and spend money unlocking items such as character art, production material, and even musical bits. Or we could just dive in a money pit and have fun there. That almost makes the tutorial worth it. Almost. From there, Remaster plays out as the NES original did. You get to pick from one of 5 stages, at which point you'll be guiding Scrooge through these labyrinthian stages to uncover loot for funds, food for health, and also key items that will let you access later portions of each stage or beyond. Something you didn't need to do the first time around, and to be fair, these are located in spots that any veteran of the '89 game would already be familiar with, so it's not that big of a deal. As before, Scrooge has his cane as his only tool of convenience, which can be used to clear away boxes and stones with a nimble golf swing, as well as a pogo stick to propel him to higher ground, as well as bopping enemies on their heads and off the screen. The game gives you the option to either hold down the B button, or whatever your cane is mapped to on the controller, to do the pogo thing, much like in DuckTales 2, or you could do the old school thing and enable hard pogo, which isn't the name of the lute instrument, you lame duck, but rather makes it so that you press down and B to do the pogo thing, much like in DuckTales 1. Nice that they give you the option to go either way. And for what it's worth, I think the pogo feels pretty good here. Works as well as it did in the previous games, perhaps a bit better because I found hit detection held up a little better here than in the old games, so that's one piece of remastering found in this here remake. Apparently this wasn't always the case, and when the game first came out originally there were issues with the pogo, but it seems like they fixed it after a while, so I don't know, it seems fine to me. In terms of recreating the old game, they kept the layouts more or less the same, so any familiarity should help in navigating these old ruins, but at the same time, they did change some things around and move some things around to accommodate new objectives, as well as new intermissions to push the exposition along, and also give the cast room to flex.
Nope.
Good. Enjoy the downtime then.
Gee, thanks, boss. because I'm docking your pay till I get back.
Gee, thanks.
In addition to making your way to the end boss, you usually have to seek out some collectibles that will unlock access to that final stretch of level. Whether it be pieces to a supposed spell to open up a doorway, or coins to a monument, or whatever the case may be, you're now given an incentive to explore these stages, which I'm a bit mixed on. On the one hand, it's nice to see Remastered give the game a bit more depth and flesh out some exploratory bits, but on the other hand, when a game forces you to explore every nook and cranny to find every key item to unlock this one room to move forward, it feels a bit artificial. No longer are you going that extra mile to find hidden goodies for a lark, now you're doing it as part of a mandatory fetch quest to move the story forward. Doesn't quite feel as open-ended now, does it? That's really my biggest gripe here. That, and some of the bosses that they fleshed out, hey, appreciate the fresh coat of paint and making it so it's not a straight one-to-one copy and paste job, but I don't care for the whole follow the pattern, wait for an opening, repeat 8 more times that some of these bosses adopt. Minor gripe, I'm sure. And also, much like in the NES original, once you beat a stage, you can't go back and play it again. Which means that even if you beat the game once, on either of the 3 skill settings, which modifies your earnings after clearing a stage, you won't have enough money to spend on the gallery if you intend on unlocking everything in there, which means having to replay the game multiple times to earn that cash to spend. And that's what makes DuckTales so appealing and so lasting, is that you play a rich duck who gathers treasures and loot around the world to become an even richer duck, so that he can afterwards spend all that money on worthless rubbish like concept art and music tracks. Hey, nice for those who are into that sort of thing, but I'd much rather fill that money vault instead. That's what rich people would do, after all. You know, I didn't mind the minecart segments. A little more challenging affairs compared to the NES original, and McDuck can rest easy knowing that he isn't abandoning anyone in those carts as they fall off the rails. And while the final level does pose a bit of a steep difficulty spike compared to the rest of the game, it is at least straightforward, and honestly, it's a new level rather than a reuse of a previous level for a final confrontation. That's already a step up in my book. So Remastered redoes all the graphical assets, and you've got this interesting combination of 2D hand-animated looking character sprites and artwork interacting along with these fully 3D polygonal environments. I'll say that the sprite work is exceptional, not quite silky smooth in terms of animation frames, and mouths don't move when the characters are talking. No, fuck off, Beck. You came out years later and your cutscenes used a full screen, you lazy bastard. You had no fucking excuse. Get the fuck out of here. But in terms of recreating that vintage cartoon style and character design, I thought WayForward pulled it off quite nicely. Now the 3D assets, the environments and what have you, they look alright. They provide backgrounds and set pieces for you to travel through. They're consistent with base quality polygons of that era. They look fine, I don't care. I mean, the style on a whole is fine, but whatever. Now, there's the matter of the extra story bits added that, yes, it does pad out the game a bit and feels a bit needless at times, but on the other hand, you could easily skip these if you want with the press of a button. And also, having some story bits to flesh out the game and give the characters reason for venturing into these lands beyond merely treasure hunting, not to mention giving the cast more to do than just merely reading a couple lines that pop up in a couple places, isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sure, I'll get tired of these after a while, but especially replaying the same bits over and over again, but for the first couple times while the novelty is still there, I don't mind it. And to me, that was actually the big deal maker, was that they brought in the then surviving cast members of that DuckTales crew, including the late Alan Young, who voiced Scrooge McDuck for the better part of 4 frickin' decades, and this would be one of the last times he'd voiced the character before his passing in 2016. And then June Foray would be gone a couple years later, and out of that original crew, Terry McGovern, the original voice of Launchpad McQuack, is the only surviving member. And the acting here is perfectly fine. They're not dry reads, they're not phoned in or anything like that. The cast were putting their best efforts in there, and it enhances the material. I got a kick out of it. I enjoyed it. And I'm not even a DuckTales devotee or anything like that, and I enjoyed this stuff. I've heard some people complain about how old they sounded here, and there's a good reason for that. They got older, and as you get older, your voice changes. Now, if that was an issue for you, then I don't know what to tell you. I mean, better they did this in 2013 where they all sound older as opposed to 2023 where they'd sound, you know, dead. I don't know. I listened to this, and this almost reminds me of the time Interplay got the original Star Trek crew back together to voice their characters for the CD-ROM re-releases of the 25th Anniversary and Judgment Right games. And I believe that was the last time that cast would be together before they started dropping like flies. Yeah, there was no soft lighting with that one. On that note, the audio component in Remastered is interesting, to say the least. They've retained some of the old 8-bit sound effects while adding in some more livelier ones, for lack of a better term, to fit the then modern tech or something resembling it. And the new takes on the classic DuckTales soundtrack is a classic case of your mileage may vary. I, for one, didn't mind the new takes. They sound pretty good for the most part, fairly faithful to the source material, while putting a more current twist to it, which is where the mileage is going to vary for some people. And a couple of new tracks that they tossed in there for the new bits aren't too bad sounding either. Not sure if there's an option to play the 8-bit tracks during the game, that if there's a feature you could unlock in the gallery, which I didn't unlock enough to find out because yeah, I like the game, but I don't like it enough to unlock all of this stuff. Sorry, I've got other stuff to do these days. And that was DuckTales Remastered. Some people dig it, others didn't. I thought it was fine. I would have been more honest and call it a remake rather than a remaster, but then again, that's semantics and all that. Still, I'd say it's a pretty respectable reinterpretation of a classic title that I find will not only appeal to those with fond memories of those classic NES titles, but even those with no nostalgic ties to the source material who just want a fun, tightly crafted platformer with plenty of TLC put into the product. Now, part of me wishes they'd have done something similar for the second game, considering that's the rarer and honestly the more interesting game of the two. Would have pushed me to play all these things much earlier, but better late than never, I suppose. I can't speak for the other versions, but as of this recording at least, DuckTales Remastered is still on Steam, and it still runs quite nicely on 2026 specs without much twiddling around, which is greatly appreciated. All in all, if you liked old DuckTales and never got around to this one for whatever reason, I'd say give this a shot while you can. It's a worthy remake. Even in this current climate where the original DuckTales is easily available to play via the Afternoon Collection, Remastered still holds value and playability today. If only for no other reason than to see the cast of that original DuckTales cartoon give one final performance together in grand fashion before the body count starts going up. Oh yeah, hell of a note to end on. That's not going to be a downer whatsoever. Oh well. Good night.